Hertford College is a constituent college of the University of Oxford in England. It is located on Catte Street in the centre of Oxford, directly opposite the main gate to the Bodleian Library. The college is known for its iconic bridge, the Bridge of Sighs. As of 2012, the college had a financial endowment of £42.6 million. There are 612 students, plus various visiting students from universities all over the world. Some famous alumni include William Tyndale, John Donne, Thomas Hobbes, Jonathan Swift and Evelyn Waugh. History. Hart Hall. The college began life as Hart Hall, a small tenement built roughly where the college's old hall is today, a few paces along New College Lane on the southern side. In medieval Oxford, halls were primarily lodging houses for students and resident tutors. The land for Hart Hall was purchased by Elias de Hertford. Hertford College stands on land once owned by Walter Grendon, Mercer of Oxford. Walter Grendon, Mercer owned the tenement that wound up in the hands of the man that built Hart Hall. The original tenement, mentioned in the deed of 1283, which was bought by Elias de Hertford from Walter de Grendon, Mercer, lay between a tenement of the University on the west and a tenement of the Prioress of Studley on the east. In the deed by which Elias de Hertford sells it to John de Docklinton in 1301, this last tenement is called Michelde Hall. The deed was made over to his son, also Elias, in 1301. The name of the hall was likely a humorous reduction of the name of its founder's hometown, and allowed for the use of the symbol of a heart to be used for identification. At the time, New College Lane was known as Hammer Hall Lane, and its northern side was the Old Town Wall. The corner of Hammer Hall Lane and Catte Street was taken by Black Hall, which was the place of John Wycliffe's imprisonment by the Vice-Chancellor around 1378. On the other side of Hart Hall along the lane was Shield Hall. On Catte Street itself was the entrance to Arthur Hall, which lay down a narrow passage behind Hart Hall, and Catte Hall, which stood further south, roughly where the principal's lodgings now stand. The younger Elias sold on Hart Hall after a month to a wealthy local fishmonger John of Ducklington, who, 7 years later, bought Arthur Hall and annexed it to Hart Hall. In 1312, John sold the two halls to Walter de Stapledon, Bishop of Exeter, who desired to found a college. After just over a year, Stapledon moved his scholars to a larger site that he had purchased on Turl Street, which became Stapledon Hall, later Exeter College. However, Exeter College retained certain rights over Hart Hall, with which it plagued the hall's development for centuries. In 1379, Hart Hall and Black Hall were rented by William of Wykeham as a temporary home for his scholars as his new college. To the east along what became New College Lane was being built. The first two wardens of New College also appear as principals of Hart Hall. Until the 17th century, there is evidence of scholars matriculating at Hart Hall while waiting for a vacancy at New College. By this time, it appears that Shield Hall had been partly taken over by Hart Hall and partly demolished to make way for New College's cloister. Although Black Hall continued a separate existence, its principal was often the same as Hart Hall's. In 1490, Hart Hall is described as having a library, which was unusual for a hall. In 1530, Hart Hall annexed Black Hall also. For some time, Catte Hall was leased by All Souls College, and then by Exeter College, until it also was subsumed into the growing Hart Hall early in the 16th century, giving the hall most of the land around what is today its old Quadrangle. In the latter half of the 16th century, Hart Hall became known as a refuge for Catholic recusants, particularly under Philip Randall as principal, because of its connection with Exeter College and the college's increasing Puritanism. A number of Exeter's tutors and scholars migrated to Hart Hall. The hall attracted an increasing number of Catholics from further afield, including the Jesuit tutor Richard Holtby in 1574, who was instrumental in the conversion of his student, and later Jesuit martyr and Saint Alexander Bryant to Catholicism. Coming from a Catholic family, the English poet John Donne came up to Hart Hall in 1584. Hart Hall expanded and new buildings were put up. In the early 17th century, the current senior common room was built as lodgings for the principal. For this period also, the main entrance of the hall moved from being a narrow passage off New College Lane to a gate on Catte Street. By the late 17th century, Catte Hall is described as being used as the ball court of Hart Hall. In the latter part of the 17th century, the principal, Dr. William Thornton, provided a proper gate for the Catte Street entrance of the hall, and decorated with a device of a drinking heart with the motto Sicut Servis Angelit ad Fontes Aquarum. Although the current Gatehouse is not Thornton's original, it retains the design and motto, and houses the original decorated gates. It has been suggested that this frieze with its Latin motto is the real counterpart of the one translated for the waiting crowd by the title character of Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure. In 1692, the political satirist Jonathan Swift was incorporated from Trinity College, Dublin, on the books of Hart Hall to receive his M.A. Richard Newton's Hertford College on the 28th of July 1710. The Rev. Dr. Richard Newton was admitted principal of Hart Hall. Newton was a well-connected, energetic educational reformer. He was appointed principal from a very peaceful retirement as rector of Sudbury, where he was personal tutor to two brothers, who were both destined to be Prime Minister, Thomas Pelham Hollis and Henry Pelham, bringing the younger with him to Hart Hall. He dedicated himself to raising the hall from debt and securing a firm financial endowment. Newton planned to redesign the hall around a proper quadrangle, with a tutor or angler, and students living in each angle, and common buildings along the sides. However, only two buildings in his design were ever built, one angle in the southeast corner of the old quadrangle, and his simple stone chapel on the south side, which now serves as the college's library. These buildings were financed entirely from Newton's pocket, to the sum of around £2,000. In 1720, Newton published his scheme of disciplines, laying out his scheme of education with a view to obtaining a charter of incorporation, and, on the 18th of May 1723, he presented his petition for a charter. The proposal met immediate opposition, especially from Exeter College, exercising its old rights, and All Souls, desiring to expand northward onto the hall's land. In addition, the appointments of principals for the various halls had established itself in a game of promotion, and a few would-be principals opposed the plan. John Conabeer, then a Fellow of Exeter, and later Bishop of Bristol, was Newton's most ardent opponent, penning the book Calumny refuted against Newton's reforms. After years of struggle, Richard Newton's statues were accepted on the 3rd of November 1739, and the charter incorporating the principal and fellows of Hertford College was received on the 8th of September 1740. Newton's Hertford was a relatively Spartan college, having received no real endowment. Meals were simple and cheap, and the principal insisted on eating the same as everyone else. Students were expected to work hard, and, where Newton found the university's education lacking, he supplemented it with disputations within the college. Newton allowed gentlemen commoners to matriculate at the college, but they paid double fees for the same accommodation and food as the others. They were originally allowed to wear the coloured gowns and tufted caps, but Newton eventually made them wear the ordinary black gown. Thus, many a well-to-do family sent their sons to Hertford College to instill in them some disciplined education. Unlike the privileged white wining and dining had by gentlemen commoners in other colleges. After Richard Newton's death in 1753, the principalship of the college fell to a succession of men mostly lacking the desire or energy to continue the predecessor's plan. One exception to this succession was David Durrell, who built up the reputation and academic success of the college. Under Durrell, the future statesman Charles James Fox matriculated in 1764. However, the scheme of 4 tutors in the respective angles was reduced to 2, and cheaper junior fellows took over some of the burden of tutoring. It was at Hartford that the tutor Benjamin Blaney prepared his 1769 standard edition of the Authorized King James Version of the Bible. Apart from Durrell's principalship, the college went into decline due to the mismanagement of uninterested principals and the lack of decent endowments. In May 1805, Bernard Hodgson, last principal of Hertford College, died, and no suitable successor could be found and agreed upon. By 1810, matriculation had ceased, and the last students were awarded their degrees. The last tutor and vice-principal, Richard Hewitt, continued to live in his rooms without students until May 1816, when a commission declared Hertford College dissolved. Magdalen Hall. The demise of Hertford College was welcomed by Magdalen College, who had long been searching for a way of expelling its namesake neighbor Magdalen Hall. Before the demise of Hertford, Magdalen College conspired to make its site ready to receive a transplanted Magdalen Hall. Rarely did Magdalen Hall make use of a badge of arms, but, when it did, it used the same as those of the college. The current lodge of Hertford College thus still bears the arms of Magdalen Hall beside those of Hertford College and the university. Magdalen Hall was founded in 1448 by William Waynflete, Bishop of Winchester and Lord Chancellor, who later also founded Magdalen College. Its site, to the west of the college, on what is now the college's St. Swithin's buildings, was originally a grammar school with some associated tenements, providing residence for students. The first master of the grammar school was appointed in 1480, and its original school building was erected in 1486. However, as the school took independent students as well as those belonging to the college, it quickly became an independent institution under its own principle. Magdalen Hall was known for its adherence to the teachings of John Wycliffe, and it was here that William Tyndale, translator of the English Bible and martyr, studied. Another famous student of the hall was the political philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who came up in either 1601 or 1602. At the English Civil War, Magdalen Hall was known as a Puritan hall under the principalship of Henry Wilkinson. John Mcbride became both principal of Magdalen Hall and Lord Almoners Professor of Arabic in 1813, and plans to move the hall to the site of Hertford College were already afoot. On the 15th of March 1815, Magdalen College submitted a proposal for the move to convocation. Magdalen College proposed to repair the Hertford buildings and defray the expensive Magdalen Hall's move to the site, while the hall were to relinquish claim to their own buildings to Magdalen College. An Act of Parliament was passed supporting the plan, but no move was made until a fire accidentally started by an undergraduate on the 9th of January 1820 destroyed almost half of Magdalen Hall's buildings. Not long after this, one of Hertford College's buildings on Catte Street, so flimsy that it was known as the Paper Building, collapsed. With this motivation, the new foundation stone of Magdalen Hall was laid at the new site on the 3rd of May 1820, and the hall's migration was complete by 1822. The Catte Street frontage was pulled down and rebuilt, and several buildings had an extra story added to them. Magdalen Hall expanded to fill the space, and became the largest hall by far, numbering 214 members in 1846. Mcbride and his vice-principals were active in building up the refounded Magdalen Hall. To distance the hall from its namesake college, Mcbride attempted to change the name to Magdalen Hall, but this change was never accepted. Mcbride served as principal for 54 years, until his death in 1868. The Mcbride Sermon, one of the university sermons, is preached each Hilary term in the chapel of Hertford College in his memory. During John Mcbride's principalship, it became clear that the growing, energetic Magdalen Hall should be incorporated as a college to match its academic standing in the university. Seeing as the name Magdalen College was already taken, the favored option was the revival of Hertford College. Mcbride was succeeded as principal by his vice-principal Richard Mitchell in 1868. He brought a bill before Parliament in 1873 for the incorporation of Magdalen Hall as Hertford College. The bill received significant financial support from Thomas Baring, then newly elected MP for South Essex. Baring had been a Fellow of Brasenose College, and had offered a substantial endowment of fellowships and scholarships to that college, but it had been refused, as Brasenose rejected his conditions of restricting the funds to members of the Church of England. However, to ease the passage of the bill, Baring removed his condition to the first instalment of the endowment, and Magdalen Hall was incorporated as the principal Fellows and Scholars of Hertford College on the 7th of August 1874. Thus, Mitchell became the last principal of Magdalen Hall and the first principal of the refounded Hertford College. Baring bought a house across New College Lane from the college to serve as Fellows' lodgings, which was the first move of the college onto the northern side of New College Lane. This was soon followed by the purchase of other houses on that side of the road, which were collectively known as Ades, and the old chapel of Our Lady at Smithgate. Also during this period, a gatehouse was built on the Catte Street frontage and the old doors were reinstalled there. A new dining hall was built above the gatehouse, and much of the northern side of the old Quadrangle, apart from Old Hall, was rebuilt. 20th and 21st centuries. In 1877, Henry Boyd succeeded Mitchell, becoming the second principal of the refounded Hertford College. His energy, good connections and longevity created the modern college as it is today. Boyd's name appears carved on the landmark Bridge of Sighs, and he is commemorated by a memorial in the chapel and a portrait in the hall. Boyd's partnership with the architect Thomas Graham Jackson brought about the expansion of the college and its endowment with its iconic Anglo-Jackson buildings. In 1887, Jackson began work on the gatehouse, the hall and its spiral staircase, and the north range of the old quad. In 1901, Jackson started building the college's site on the northern side of New College Lane. By 1908, he had completed a new chapel, which he declared to be his favorite work. Eventually, after much opposition, he built the Bridge of Sighs, linking the old and new quads across New College Lane, in 1913. In the two World Wars, a total of 171 members of Hertford College died. Notable among them is Major Percy Nugent Fitzpatrick, son of James Percy Fitzpatrick, who was killed near Cambrai on the 14th of December 1917. It was with the death of his son that James Percy Fitzpatrick made the suggestion after the wars, and to keep a 2-minute silence each year on Armistice Day. In 1922, the novelist Evelyn Waugh came up to Hartford, famously feuding with his history tutor CRM F. Crutwell, and later naming a number of odious characters after him. Waugh wrote of his time at Hartford, "I'd no work here and never go to chapel." He novelized his time at Oxford in Brideshead Revisited, having his protagonist Charles Ryder at Hartford. Starting from 1965, Hartford made a special effort to encourage applicants from state schools through the Hartford scheme. This had the effect of dramatically raising academic standards within the college, and other colleges introduced similar initiatives. Today, among both applications received by the college and current undergraduates, the percentage of individuals from state schools applications is higher than at most Oxford colleges. This commitment to diversity is in keeping with Hartford's earlier history of openness throughout the 20th century. Hartford admitted the first African-American Rhodes Scholar, Alan Leroy Locke, after he had been refused by several other colleges. Geoffrey Warnock served as the 9th principal of the refounded college from 1971 until 1988, and presided over the latest period of growth, and established the college's leftist credentials. In 1974, Hartford became one of the first 5 co-educational colleges in the university. The college now has an almost equal gender balance, with slight variations from year to year. In memory of Warnock, the college has a student accommodation building near Folly Bridge named after him. He also has a memorial in the chapel, and a portrait behind High Table in the hall. Buildings. Hertford College's main site is situated on Catte Street, New College Lane and Holywell Street. The site consists of 3 quadrangles: Old Quadrangle, New Quadrangle, and Holywell Quadrangle. The college also has 3 large groups of buildings for student accommodation near Folly Bridge: Warnock House, the Graduate Centre and Abingdon House. In addition to these, the college owns a number of houses around Oxford. Old Quadrangle. The Old Quadrangle is, as the name suggests, the oldest and the original quadrangle. Its entrance is through the Gatehouse on Catte Street, directly opposite the main gates of the Bodleian Library. The Gatehouse is a late 19th century building by Thomas Graham Jackson, bearing the image of a drinking heart above the archway. However, the wooden doors with the colourful floral decoration of the original gates of Hart Hall from the 17th century. The Gatehouse houses the lodge. Through the Gatehouse, the quadrangle is laid out around a pleasant lawn with a few decorative trees. The lawn is off-limits during Michaelmas and Hilary terms, but is accessible during Trinity term for sitting on and croquet. Senior fellows of the college are granted the privilege of being able to walk across the lawn all year round. In the northeast corner of the quad is the Old Hall, the oldest remaining buildings of Hart Hall, dating from the 1570s. The Old Hall and its adjoining buttery are now in regular use for dining, especially by the fellows. Running southwards, along the eastern side of the quad, is a 17th century building, with oriel windows tucked away on its southern end. Originally, the portion closest to the Old Hall was student accommodation, and the southern portion was the principal's lodgings. Today the building is mostly taken over by the senior common room, with the northern ground floor room being the old library. In the southeast corner is the 18th century cottage, the only one of the planned 4 angles of Dr. Newton that was ever built. Originally, this occupied the entire corner around to what was the chapel. Its southern side was demolished to make way for Jackson's chapel. The southern side of the quad consists of the chapel, built in 1908 by Jackson, which has a particularly good acoustic. Its ante-chapel houses a stained glass window depicting William Tyndale, made in 1911 for the British and Foreign Bible Society, and installed at Hartford in 1994. West of the chapel is the library, which was the previous chapel built in the 18th century by Newton. The library possesses many fine, antique books, most of which belonged to the library of Magdalen Hall. Among these are many rare 17th century manuscripts and an original edition of Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan given as a personal gift to the college. Hobbes prepared this work while at Magdalen Hall. The western side of the quad has the Gatehouse with the lodge in its centre. On either side of this are slightly earlier buildings, the southern of which is the principal's lodgings, and the northern mostly houses the college's offices. In addition, the northwest building has access onto the Bridge of Sighs. Above the gatehouse is the dining hall, which is wood-panelled and hung with a number of college portraits. The hall is reached from the quad by a distinctive stone spiral staircase designed by Jackson, and inspired by the spiral staircase at the Château de Blois. The northern side of the quad consists of a building by Jackson, much of which now houses the bursary. The building is infamous as the site of the incident novelized in Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited, in which Sebastian Flyte, returning from a Bullingdon club bender, vomits through a window into a ground-floor room. New Quadrangle. The New Quadrangle is connected to the Old Quadrangle, across New College Lane, by the Bridge of Sighs, which was designed by Thomas Graham Jackson. The northwestern corner of New Quad is taken up by the Indian Institute building, which is not part of Hertford College. Most of the new buildings are early 20th century designs by Jackson, except the slightly later frontage onto Holywell Street, on the northern side of the quad. The quad is entered through a gate onto Catte Street, just opposite the Clarendon building. New Quad is mostly used for undergraduate accommodation. The most significant building in the quad is the Octagon, just north of the gate on Catte Street, which houses the middle common room. It is the 16th-century chapel of St. Mary the Virgin at Smithgate, which formed a bastion in the town walls. An original carving of the scene of the Annunciation can be seen from Catte Street, just beside the gate. Holywell Quadrangle backs directly onto New Quad, and the two are connected by an arched corridor that also contains the steps down to Hartford's subterranean bar. Holywell Quad was built in 1975, and is almost exclusively for first-year undergraduate housing. Its main features are a gate onto Holywell Street, the junior common room in the southeast corner, and the bearing room, which is a multi-purpose hall at the top of the southern staircase.